Hello all, I'm Marja, and I'm here yet again, delving into another fascinating topic right here at the Lecture Center. Where else can we have these philosophical talks without turning it into something boring and seemingly out of touch with the modern world? And before we really get into it, let me give you today's topic, because I really was inspired, and I was inspired by scrolling through X. Somebody said this, and this is the topic of this podcast. The world is upside down. So this podcast is going to really go into that. We're going to talk about that. What does that mean? What was I thinking? And if anybody knows me, you're all going to get to know me. I am really a thinker. I'm an analytical thinker. I'm a philosophical thinker. I just really go into it. Have any of you been looking at the news, or have you been on X? I'm telling you, X is where it's at. You need to be on X. If you're not on X, you should get on X. X I like much better than the other social media platforms because, well, a lot of news is posted there first, and there are many people that have very interesting comments, and I'm all for interesting. So there's so much happening politically, socially, economically, and spiritually. Yes, I said it, spiritually. And that's what I'm talking about. And that's where I want to take it today, because it's time. For many years, I have been doing podcasts about mankind and his spiritual origin, but people just weren't ready. I didn't get a lot of listens. I didn't get a lot of views. I didn't get hits. I didn't get any of that. Because I think that most people just couldn't grasp what I was talking about. They just couldn't relate to it. It was just too far out there. But now, everything's falling into place. And the things that I said years ago, even in 2020, which was not that long ago, is making total sense now. I know it's the time because people are noticing that the world is indeed upside down. It's inverted. I like to say that we are in the time of the inverted pyramid, or the inverted triangle. And what used to be considered morally upright or righteous is now downright evil. Evil, of course, in the eyes of the benighted. Friends, that's what we're actually going into this episode. We're not going to get too biblical. I don't really consider myself that knowledgeable when it comes to the scriptures. There are scriptures that I know, but I couldn't tell you the verse and all of that. So there's no point in going there. But there will be some references, because the references will be apropos. I also want to make mention that we are indeed in the last days, and the signs are here. And I know the older people used to say it all the time. I used to hear my grandmother say, "Oh, these are the last days. This is the end." And some of us that have been to church, we've heard that from the elders in the church. But that's all they would ever say. And we didn't really understand what they meant, especially when we were younger. We heard it so much, it really became cliche. However, now, as I'm older and I'm beginning to understand and perceive what is going on around me, I realize that one of the signs of the end of days is the moral decay of mankind. And what I actually mean is that mankind has lost his ability to discern goodness from evil. Friends, this is major. Major. That means that people are really lost. And this is what I said at the top. What people think is good is actually evil, and what people think is evil is actually good. So we as men have lost our way, and this is actually known as spiritual darkness. And in the scriptures, there are many references to light and darkness. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the darkness of the soul, of the human soul. So the world is in darkness, but most people are so lost they have no idea. And these questions I want to attempt to answer. I think there are maybe two questions. The first one is, how did we get to this point? And the second is, now that we are at this point, what should we do, if anything at all? Now, the media, particularly social media, has allowed us to be voyeurs. things that our ancestors could never have seen or known, we now know. And on a daily basis, we are inundated with images, sounds, and stories that evoke our deepest and darkest of fears and emotions. According to the media, we're in a society that is full of hatred toward people of color, and other marginalized groups that I think you know of, one being LGBTQ+, non-binary, and so forth. And it doesn't stop there. Every day there's a new marginalized group, and I can't keep up with it all. We are also being shown images of madmen such as Luigi Mangione, and the most recent one who mowed down about 15 young people in the early hours of New Year's Day in New Orleans, Louisiana. I won't even call his name on this podcast. We are watching criminals. I mean, stone cold criminals not facing jail time for committing sex crimes against children. Yes, that's even true. And there are even talks of the Menendez brothers possibly being released from prison. And if you know anything about their story, it's gruesome, it's heinous, and it was completely barbaric. Should I stop there? No, I don't want to stop. What about the constant school shootings, the corruption in government agencies, the government officials, this ongoing debate about abortion, what constitutes viability in life, and so forth? Friends, we have slowly become desensitized. We no longer know or understand what it means to be human, and because we are here in this dark place, we can't find our way out. So we continue. We bury ourselves in the hole that we have created instead of looking to ourselves. We play the blame game. The media is the problem. Oh, no, it's the Dems. No, it's MAGA. They're crazy. Oh, no, it's systemic racism. It's the illegals. It's the trans community. They're the ones who are really lost. Did I miss anyone? Whose name didn't I call? Friends, we can be lighthearted about this, but the fact remains. It is the fact that we have lost our identity, and this identity I speak of is in our culture. And this culture must be an ethical one, rooted first and foremost in principles. The prime reason that the question, what is a woman, was ever posed was not because of those who identify as transgender. It was really because we women don't know what a woman is. If a woman knows who she is, then nobody, and I mean nobody, could simply hijack the word woman and then refute what a real woman is. Identity is something that is very solid. It is foundational because it rests upon truth. Do you know what I mean when I use the word truth? In this context, I don't mean the opposite of a lie. What I do mean, however, is that it's contrary to the false. The false is that which has no basis. It has nothing to rest upon it. It has no foundation. It is built on nothing. And that is what makes it weak and very easy and susceptible to collapse. Now, I know that for years, arguments have been made by philosophers regarding the validity of truth. These arguments are about absolutism and relativism and all of that. And I've never accepted the arguments in favor of this relativism because it rejects the underpinnings of life itself. And those who argue that there is no good or no bad and all is equal and actually everything is all on the same level and all on the same field. People that argue that reject harmony, reject balance, reject order. They believe that disorder and chaos is equivalent to freedom. This is why they like the idea of having nothing that is absolute. Friends, this is where we are. What we are witnessing is a society that is in moral decline. At one time long ago, we were all pretty much on the same page when it came to what was morally upright and acceptable, or just plain wrong. For example, let's take it back over 50 years ago. Teenage pregnancy was seen as a moral evil, especially out of wedlock. Back then, girls having babies out of wedlock brought a terrible shame to the family, and some were sent away, others were forced to give the baby up for adoption. But what do we do nowadays? Well, for one, we tolerate it. We don't admonish teenage sex. As a matter of fact, we encourage it. And that movement started during the age of HIV in the late 1980s and 90s. The thought was, well, if we give them condoms, it will keep them from getting pregnant and protect them from the virus. So schools started teaching about HIV, sex, and condoms. But after the HIV madness died down somewhere, I guess in the 2000s, people went back to not using condoms. People didn't even talk about condoms. And that didn't help the situation at all, because HIV was still out there and is still out there. And young girls certainly could still become pregnant, and many of them did. But most, instead of opting to have the baby, decided to use abortion as the new form of birth control. This is what they don't want to talk about. That is what they don't want to say. Instead, they want to argue, and they like to argue in extremes. They like to talk about using abortion as a way to, well, if a woman is raped and she gets pregnant and she doesn't want the baby, she shouldn't have to carry it to term, and abortion. That's what they like to argue. I know that some people will have a bone to pick with me about that statement, but for many girls in the inner cities, it's just too easy to get it done. They have Medicaid, they have government insurance, they just go to Planned Parenthood, they go to a local clinic in their neighborhood, and as an old friend of mine used to say, I'm going to take this baby out. I'm going to go take it out. That was the way she would say it. And I happen to know more than a few women who had probably over 5 and up to 10 abortions in their lifetime. Now, I'm not saying this to point the finger. I'm saying this to shed light on the fact that we as a society went from teaching abstinence until married to, well, they're going to do it anyway. We might as well hand them a condom. And let's fund free abortion clinics. Do you all see the progression here? The question we ought to raise is, how on earth did we go from teaching abstinence and marriage to being okay with killing a fetus? This is the darkness that I was talking about at the top. I was talking about being desensitized, no longer being in touch with the part of us that is human. And that is our feelings and emotions. I like to say our sentience. We didn't get here overnight, friends, but what truly amazes me is how we've come to rationalize our descent into madness. Oh, friends, that is what it is. If we look at the type of crimes that are being committed, and abortion should be a crime, but it's not. And that's because it's rationalized. You see, when we get to that point where we start rationalizing evil, it's too late. We can see now that crimes are becoming more and more debased. As a Westerner, I've always been proud that we held ourselves to a higher standard than that of our third world counterparts. But now, this is not so. We, my friends, are slipping down to their level. We are and have become what the definition of a real banana republic is, and I'm not referring to its economic situation. This is about the moral disposition of the people. Now, I don't think it's any secret that third world crime is different from the crimes in the Western world. I think we're now beginning to realize, thanks to social media, the vast difference in their level of criminality as opposed to ours. This is a lot because I'm going into something heavy. Just a little over a week ago, New York City witnessed the most horrific subway crime ever. A woman identified as Debrina Kawam, I may not be pronouncing it correctly, I hope I did it some justice, from New Jersey, was set ablaze by, I believe he was from Guatemala, a Guatemalan migrant, as he watched her burn to death. At one point, friends, he even was fanning the flame. Stop the madness, stop the madness, stop the madness. Onlookers recorded the woman burning to death, and the video was shared around the world. Now, it was, for those of us in the West, the most frightening thing we had ever seen. And I remember looking at the footage on X and reading the comments, and so many people said that they were disturbed watching it. There were others who said they could not watch it. They could not make it through the video. I was equally disturbed. This, however, goes back to what I said about third world crime being different from what we experience in the West. There are crimes, and then there is depravity. That is what we witnessed. We witnessed something that we had never experienced before, and it actually made us think and feel again. It made us realize that we are human. We've lost touch with ourselves and our humanity. That part of us that is awake, aware, it is our sentience, and that is at the core of what it means to be human. So what am I getting at? When a person gets to a point, a low point, where he can burn someone to death and watch it without flinching, that part of him, the one I just told you about, his ability to think and feel has devolved into that of a subhuman. Friends, we can't call it an animal because animals don't kill for sport, and animals do not have the mental capacity of men. I'm not sure who said this, but it was said that it can take centuries to erect a civil society and all but a day for it to fall. Ponder on that. It is really of the nature of the human species to evolve and devolve. This is something that we have no control over. It happens. It's part of the cycle that is life. And I think it's important to note that a real human and being a real human isn't about having 2 arms and 2 legs. Humanity has nothing to do with our appearance. And this is when it gets really interesting. This is where we're going with this. We're getting to the meat now. The meat, I like to call it the meat. Because if being human or being of the human species is not a look, then what is it? Well, friends, I already said it, but I'll say it again. It is the moral disposition of a person, which is rooted in his identity. And the identity is really the undefined self. All of us have a self, and we know this because there is not one person on earth who doesn't refer to himself as capital letter I. Is your center? That is your essence. That is your character. That is the self. And it is that self that comes into the world undefined. And what do I mean by undefined? Meaning without moral character. And it is up to the person, the individual, to define the self. This is why individuality is so important. That is why it is important for man to evolve from primitivism, from the tribe. He has to evolve. Because if he doesn't grow up and mature and move away from the tribe, he will never be able to properly define himself. Each and every one of us must define ourselves. We must define our moral character. And when the moral character is defined, man can then come back to the group and give the group that self that he cultivated when he moved outside of the group. And that's another podcast, but I had to say that because there are people right now that are advocating for tribalism. They want us to go back to tribes. They hate individuality. They think it's selfish. They think anything having to do with the Western world is wrong. And so they're calling for that. That's what restorative justice is rooted in. Friends, I can talk about all of it. We can have an entire podcast about it. It's all related. It all correlates. That's why I have to talk about it. So this self is not defined in the world of people, places, and things. Your parents don't make you. Your title, your position, your money, your possessions, none of that defines the self. It does not define who you are. We are all defined by our moral character, and that is what makes us. That is what happens when a woman knows who she is. When a woman knows who she is, a man knows who he is. So the question, therefore, is not, what is a woman? Because a woman is not a thing. She is a who, and she defines herself within. And that is how she is defined in the external world. None of this is superficial. And I get it, a woman is defined by her chromosomal makeup, but that's superficial. And because it's superficial, it's not strong enough to hold up in society. As you can see, it's being refuted as we speak. We are being told that a woman is whatever they want it to be. But if that's the case, then they have completely annihilated the woman. There is no woman, if it's any and everything, because there's no clear definition of who a woman is. I told you at the top of this podcast that when there's no truth, all is undefined and nothing has any meaning. And that is really the definition of disorder and chaos, which facilitates and paves the way for incivility and barbarism. Let's get this out now. There will always be barbarity, savagery, and man's inhumanity to man. However, in a civil society where the law is adhered to, the uncivil lawbreakers who I have said are the subhuman can be kept at bay. And that's very important. Because where there's no law and total disorder in the form of nihilism, an entire civilization can and will become unraveled in record time. And this is what emboldens the most depraved, demoralizing, and dehumanizing criminals. This is why they no longer hide in shame. They come out in the open with needles in their limbs, pus and blood oozing from their sores. They bombard their way into thoroughfares, robbing peddlers and stealing merchandise from our small businesses and even the big ones with impunity. Because there's no one who stands firm with conviction and acts as a true leader should. That's why the lawless have taken a hold and made slaves of we the law-abiding. This is the inverted society that we are now in. In the major cities, you can't even wear jewelry. You can't walk with your iPhone on display. Most of our major pharmacies and even Target have damn near everything locked in cabinets. And all of this is blamed on policy. If only it were that simple. Of course, we can see that, yes, indeed, a lot of this is due to changes in policy. But as you can see, they refuse to correct it. That's the real issue. They see what's happening. Please don't think they don't. The fact is this. They don't care. Because in their backwards minds, they see all of this as retribution. Yes, I'm telling you, some sort of perverted justice for what they consider the wrongs of the white man, the rich, and everything else in between. This is how they think. Let the migrants in. It's their land to begin with. That evil white colonizer has some nerve to want to shut the border down when he stole their land. This is their land. Who cares if they come into the country and tear it down? It's theirs to begin with. That's the thought process. This is how they justify the abolishment of jails and the defunding of the police in cities throughout the United States. Take a listen. Black and brown people have been incarcerated at levels much higher than that of whites, and their communities are over-policed. It makes sense to reform the bail laws. Too many are in jail anyway. And by the way, we ought to legalize weed too, because many POCs, people of color, are in jail because of it. Yes, we know that black and brown boys are stealing from the majority of stores in our cities, but they're poor, angry, and underprivileged. What do you expect? This is a war, friends. We are at war for our souls and for civilization. The battle is of the good, the civil, and morally upright, and those who want to take everything we have built and tear it down. There's a holy scripture that says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And as you can see, that is taking on a real meaning. Friends, if you're not religious, you don't need to be. I'm certainly not. But I do know that there is divine providence of some kind, and also of universal order, which is a higher order that is entrusted to men. Therefore, it's not God's job or divine providence. It's not its job to relegate evildoers to their place. And this is what the atheists have never understood. They've always wondered why God would stand back and watch his creation, man, destroy himself. They questioned, and they still question it. Why does God, whom the scriptures say is good, why would he allow such horrors and evil in the world? Well, the scriptures also say that God is no arbiter of men. In other words, God does not meddle into the affairs of men. Again, this is about divine providence or universal law. So friends, it's up to us. What we're witnessing is the collapse of civility due to a loss of moral, ethical principle. We are all to blame for this, because what we have done is trade our spirituality for material. That's that word, materiality. I almost got tongue-tied. We've become an entitled people who live for self-aggrandizement. We hide behind our so-called propensity to share and give to those less fortunate because it makes us seem to appear morally upright. We are not living in integrity, and the cat is out of the bag. Friends, what I'm saying is that we think we're good. And I'm not saying at one point we weren't. We weren't true to our hearts, and we weren't really living in integrity. But the evidence is showing us that we are where we are because we're not living morally upright. What we're doing for the sake of appearances. We're doing because we want to look like we're morally upright. That's called hypocrisy. We're living according to much lower moral standards than our ancestors. We have totally devalued the family and accepted things our grandparents and great-grandparents would have shunned. There's the idea that having convictions and holding to those convictions is being hard, being a rigid person. This is the way it is, friends. If we do not stand, hold to our integrity, and when I say stand, I mean remain unmoved. If we do not remain unmoved by our principles, we really don't have any. The world is upside down because we are no longer upright people who hold to their integrity. We tolerate everything and everybody, and if we don't, we get heckled. We are called non-inclusive. So this is another thing. We've said the hell with the principles, the hell with the standards, to hell with everything, because we don't want to be labeled racist. We don't want to be labeled non-inclusive. We just don't want to be the bad guy. We don't even punish our children anymore because we don't want to be the bad guy. Everybody wants to look good. You see, looking good and being good are two different things. And I always say this, good doesn't have a look. If we accept all and everything, then all of this means nothing. And we keep coming back to that theme, that nihilism theme, that nothing has any meaning at all. Friends, when we look at fallen countries like Haiti, Sudan, the countries of the Northern Triangle, Gaza, etc., this is what we see. We see land masses that contain people who cannot even form an organized government. They can't create organized systems to run their own country. Most of the people are illiterate, they're uneducated. There is no law or order to speak of. Most are barbarians without any understanding of civility and freedom. They are slaves to their primitive cultures, and because of it, there is they do not allow for growth or innovation, which also holds a people back greatly. When there is no growth and there's just stagnancy, people cannot advance. That's why they're light years behind the West. They reject the very culture that would allow for evolution. And that is the culture that we have largely embodied here in the Western world, and that is of the high culture. And I did a YouTube video on that, and you should go to my channel and watch. It's about the high culture. It's called The Debasement of High Society. Islam has been at war with the world for centuries. Its followers kill, pillage, the men rape women and children like it's going out of style. And they're still doing it. It's truly hell on earth. And that's why the people who live in those hellholes are fleeing. They want to come to the West, but the problem is they are the hellholes that they're fleeing. They are bringing that hell with them. And because we are being told by the moralists, and by the way, I did a video on YouTube about the moralists. It's called The Do-Gooders. You should go and watch that as well. They've been told by the moralists that we must be inclusive. Here we go again with that word. We must cower and accept any and everything. In other words, we don't need to have any standards with who we accept. Any and everything. But I told you a few minutes ago, it's not even about being inclusive. It's about retribution. That's what it's about for the people who say it. It's about retribution. Payback, baby. That's what it's about, which is evil. This is to our detriment. The fact that we accept any and everything. Hell is not a locale, friends. It lives in the soul of a person. And we can say the same for heaven or some kind of paradise. The Western world is good because the soul of the people is good. How do we know that? We know because when anything is good, it produces fruit. It's fruitful. It's prosperous. A third world country produces nothing but death and destruction to any and everything that comes into contact with it. And now, friends, it's here. We are witnessing this now. And how did we get here? Well, if you were listening, then you know. What should we do about it? The answer is within the question. How did we get here? A person of conviction is truly an admirable person. And I think a man of conviction is strikingly beautiful. And these men are rare. They're strong men, and they truly define what it means to be a man and manhood. And we need more men like that. But men don't know that. They don't understand that. And neither do women. We have to get beyond the superficial. But in order to do that, we need to overcome fear. You see, we're afraid of ourselves. We fear introspection because we don't want to come in contact with all the ugly things that we see in others. Because most people think that they are better than their neighbor. Nobody wants to face character flaws. If we don't acknowledge those character flaws, those imperfections, how can we then work to improve? I mean, that's what's needed. We have to swallow this pill of foolishness and do better. The world is in the condition that it is because of our own ignorance. We don't know who we are and what the hell we need to do while on earth. Man has a specific purpose. He's not on earth to remain spiritually or economically impoverished. He is here to work for advancement. But he can't do this if he doesn't understand his nature. And it's our nature that devolves us and keeps us from flourishing. In other words, if a person or a group is failing to thrive, it's not because of the environment or some powers that be. It is because they've failed to work for self-improvement, meaning that there's a resource within man that he has yet to discover that can help him overcome whatever his situation is that is holding him down or keeping him in a place of stagnancy. But man has to get in touch with himself in order to discover that he himself has access to his own resources. He is his own resource. Man is actually an entity and is a self-generated entity. And I could go heavily into that, but I won't do it now. We have yet to discover that, but we are going to discover it because that is what the age of light is all about. It is about discovering what we didn't know in the age of darkness. Today, we've fostered a society that dishonors hard work and advancement and instead rewards those who have not worked at all. There is no law of God or nature that supports this, and that is why it's proving to be detrimental to our society. If a man should want for anything, he must not look for a handout. He must do the work necessary. He must earn it. Now, does this mean that a person should not accept a gift or help given him? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that even if one is given an inheritance, he should still do the work necessary to keep it going. You can't get out of work. Anybody that tries to get out of work is trying to cheat life. And in the end, that will bite them in the ass. I've learned this in life, that the hard way ends up being the easy road. And the easy road ends up being the hard one. Life is like that. It will teach you. It will teach you. And there is no merit in laziness. We have cultivated, a society of laziness and selfishness. And that's why Gen Z doesn't want to work. That's why they don't want to work. Has anybody seen their TikToks? They're ranting and raving about work. They think that hard work is stupid. But what they don't understand is that all of the luxuries they revel in today come from the work that was done yesterday. Where do they think luxury comes from? Can you understand? Can you understand that everything is perpetual? That this wheel of life is perpetual. The wheel of work is perpetual. Everything is perpetual. We can't just stop working. We can't just stop living. We witnessed that during COVID. During COVID, there were shutdowns throughout the United States. And what happened? Well, we're paying for it now, aren't we? Businesses didn't reopen. We've got inflation through the roof. We can't just stop. What we do today bears fruit tomorrow. If we don't work, we don't eat. So work ethic, like everything else, means, well, it's been lost. Work ethic has been lost. And most people think that working is just for paying bills, but work means so much more than that. And those who find meaning in their work are truly blessed. This culture of nihilism that we have adopted is destroying Western society. And it has weakened the original moral foundation that the fathers of the United States envisioned. I find it astonishing. So many United States naturals find fault with the country that has allowed them the privileges and rights that the majority of the rest of the world could only dream of. And I'm done trying to rationalize the mindset of those fools. I have simply determined that they are on such a moral high horse that coming down to reality would afford them no purpose for living. With all that's been said, there is indeed a bright side to all of this darkness, and it lies in our resilience, the human being's resilience. We know what we want and we know how we want to live. What we must do is anchor ourselves in our convictions. And if you don't have convictions, or you did but you forgot what you stood for, then it's time to figure it out. I can't say this enough. We must have rules, laws, and systems that we all must adhere to. And those who do not want to adhere must be ostracized. They must be banished. They cannot be among us until they better themselves. It's that simple. We cannot accept anything and everything. That word inclusive has got to go from our vocabulary. There must be standards, and we, the morally upright, are in the position to dictate what they are. I assure you, divine providence will be on our side. Friends, that's all I have to say. I think I've said more than enough. I think that this podcast was truly eye-opening for me. Sometimes I get an eye-opener, even though I'm the one talking. I get these revelations while I'm talking, and it's just so interesting. I want you to join me next time, right here, right on the lecture center, right here, because this is where we philosophize on life. This is where we talk about the things that they aren't talking about. I always say that. And there's room for even more and more and more. If you ever have something that you think I should explore, something that you think we need to talk about here, shoot me an email or send a comment, write a comment. I'm always reading. I'm always online. You can reach me on X directly. That would be cool. I love to interact with all of you. Until next time.